Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're going to wait a couple minutes while people log in. Okay, we have participants joining. I want to remind everyone that this is going to be recorded and will be up on our website so that students can watch the video later on. Okay, well, welcome everyone. It really is a pleasure to have you join us on our second panel of hot topics and discussions with our faculty on lots of different subjects that are of interest to us and wonderful areas of scholarship that our faculty are involved in. So what I'm going to do is have our faculty members introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their career paths and some of the work that they're doing and some of the scholarship areas that they have been involved in. So let's start with Katie Iyer. Katie is a professor on our Camden campus. Go ahead, Katie, you're first.
Thank you, Anita. So a little bit about my background. Again, my name is Katie Iyer. I teach on the Camden campus. I've been there full time for about 10 years. Before that, I was a litigator in practice for roughly 10 years. And all of that was focused on sort of equality rights, and most particularly LGBTQ employment rights. So when I came out of law school, I had a public interest fellowship to launch what was one of the first projects in the country trying to bring claims on behalf of LGBTQ employees, which was particularly difficult at the time because there weren't many explicitly protective laws. And then I eventually moved into a private plaintiff side practice, but doing similarly specializing in LGBTQ work, but also doing disability work, race work, age discrimination cases, and the like. And I'll say that set of interests that passion has very much continued to stay with me in my work as a legal academic. So I teach anti-discrimination law classes here at the law school, in addition to teaching civil procedure. And my research remains both very much focused on anti-discrimination law and addressing issues of discrimination, both sometimes in a more theoretical or historical way, but also at times in ways that very much connect up to a sort of real world ongoing dispute. So sort of for me, the like most wonderful part of my career to date has been getting to play a significant role in the recent case in Bostock versus Clayton County, seeing your sort of scholarly ideas actually make it into a Supreme Court opinion on behalf of a community that you care a lot about is really the best of what it means to be an academic. So that's sort of the short version on me, and I will pass it back to Nancy to pass it to, or Anita. My apologies, Anita. To pass
No
it on
problem,
to one of
Katie.
my colleagues.
Thank you. I want to add for the students who are on, you can throw questions in the Q&A and/or the chat, and we'll be able to monitor that and make sure that your questions get answered. Professor Body, go ahead, you're next.
Hi, and welcome everyone. So delighted to be here, and especially delighted to be on with my colleagues, Professor Iyer and Professor Hawkins. My name is Elise Body. I teach on the Newark campus of the law school. I teach constitutional law, the introductory course, as well as an upper level constitutional law course, civil rights, state and local government law, and a new course that I've developed this semester about how we might disable systemic racism. A lot of my scholarship builds on the work that I did as a litigator. Like Professor Iyer, I litigated for a number of years before I came to the law school. I litigated as a civil rights lawyer at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and then I directed their litigation program just before I came to Rutgers. My scholarship touches on areas of race and equity. Most recently, I've been very interested in thinking about how we might use systems thinking, which has been used in other contexts in science and engineering and business to apply to civil rights, and how we might use systems thinking to dislodge these very deeply rooted systems that we're dealing with. I think, did I touch all of the high points, Anita?
Yeah, you did. We'll get back on the various centers in a minute. Professor Hawkins, go ahead, you're next.
Thank you. It is always a pleasure to be on a panel with these two colleagues, but it is always humbling to come after them and talk about the things that I've done. But I actually have a fairly non-traditional path into the legal academy. I was in private practice for about 12 years before I transitioned to law teaching about 11 years ago. And unlike my two colleagues, I was actually on the defense side. I worked in a private law firm doing largely management side labor and employment defense work. And then for a significant part of my career doing what I refer to as diversity practice management, or, at the time we were calling it diversity crisis management, because in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, there was a crisis. So not that there's not still a crisis, but we've come, I think, quite a way since then. And so not surprisingly, when I transitioned to law teaching, I started teaching an employment law course, which was, of course, my training in law practice. And then I added constitutional law to that roster. And I teach an original seminar on diversity in the law. And my scholarship sits really entirely at the intersection of law and diversity. And I write about law and diversity through two different lenses, really. One having to do with employment and hiring, and why diversity in the employment context is so important, particularly in government employment. I've had the pleasure of writing about, for instance, diversity on the federal bench and on the judiciary more generally. And so thrilled to be celebrating the first Black woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court, and hopefully to be celebrating the, her ascendance to that court after her confirmation. And then the other area that I write on is about diversity and higher education admissions. And of course, that's also a very timely topic, given the Supreme Court's consideration this term of a set of cases against Harvard and the University of North Carolina adjudicating their race-conscious admissions plans, and whether or not the court is going to change course on decades of precedent allowing colleges and universities to consider diversity in admission. So really exciting times for me, and I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you. There is a lot going on nationwide, and we forget we're almost sitting in a spot in history where we can view things through many different lenses and see how different states and different legislatures and different municipal governments are treating the topic of racism, particularly things like critical race theory being taught in public schools. That has it's worrisome about what we see that's going on. Professor Body, can you speak to that a little bit? Because I know you do a lot of work in the education area.
Yeah, sure. So just on that last point, so I've, for the last several years, have worked to facilitate a lawsuit against the state of New Jersey that challenges school segregation across the state. I'm not litigating the case. I've been actually heavily involved in trying to mobilize different civic, social justice, civil rights, faith-based organizations to engage in the issue and to support the case. On the critical race front, it's disquieting, to say the least, to see what's happening across the country with respect to critical race theory. I write in the area of critical race theory, as I believe Professor Hawkins would describe herself that way as well. And I think it's important to understand that sort of the point behind critical race theory is to reveal the deeper structures that inform and drive racial inequality. We're very accustomed, we are not accustomed. The law is heavily accustomed to relying on intentional discrimination, which is a very limited tool for reasons that hopefully you would learn when you enroll at Rutgers. And is an insufficient tool for really understanding the scope and breadth of the racial equity issues that we're dealing with now. I should have also mentioned, so when I was at LDF, I did a substantial amount of work in the Supreme Court, worked on a number of different cases, including very high profile cases, defending affirmative action in the Supreme Court, defending the Fair Housing Act, defending Title VII, defending voting rights. And I bring a lot of that work with me into the classroom as well.
Great, thank you. Professor Iyer, a lot of your work, it has been in working with the LGBTQ community and also with the disabled community. And I think people thought that once Oberfeld happened, that, oh, it's over, we're fine, we're great. And now we're seeing that that's not really the case. What do you think is coming up next?
Well, I mean, we have a little bit of a hint on that because the Supreme Court just granted certiorari in a case involving basically the rights of a wedding planner to discriminate against gay couples and whether that's protected by the First Amendment. And I think I'll say, first of all, this is a sort of long-term, I remember I went to law school because I thought we had at the time a case called Bowers versus Hardwick, which I couldn't believe it was good law. It was really disparaging of gay couples. And that got overturned when I was in law school. So, there was a moment of, well, what is there left to do? Of course, there was lots left to do. And I think that, following Obergefell, we've seen the need to enforce employment rights. But then we've also seen efforts to retrench against positive discrimination protection. So states that have gone out and said, we want to offer these types of protections, which is what's going on in the Colorado case. Efforts of folks to say, well, that infringes my First Amendment rights to religion or to expression. And we'll see what the court will do in this case. I will say, looking at the long history of these types of claims, the court has really drifted from where it started, which is, I mean, you see these claims being made in response to the earliest, the race discrimination laws of the 1960s as well. And there the court sort of starts out very dismissive of these types of arguments, but it is given them sort of more and more credence over time, I think particularly in the LGBT context. So that remains a very important frontier of to what extent can states protect their citizens against anti-LGBTQ discrimination in contexts where businesses may want to claim a right to discriminate.
Interesting. Professor Hawkins, you mentioned the affirmative action cases, Harvard and University of North Carolina, that are making their way to the Supreme Court. And both schools had won on the lower court cases, but it's still getting pushed ahead. Can you talk about that a little bit and what the heck is going on there?
So, it's hard to, read the limited tea leaves that we have about these cases. I think that one of the notable issues is that the court has joined the UNC case and allowed it to be heard on appeal, even though it wasn't even decided by the appellate circuit court. And so that's an unusual posture, which signals that the Supreme Court really wants to resolve this issue sooner rather than later. Otherwise, I think that, they might have delayed or deferred or something like that. I like to remain hopeful that the court is not going to toss aside, at this point, 20 years of precedent. And quite frankly, going back even before then, 40 years of colleges and universities really being able to consider diversity a really important part of their institutional missions, and therefore to consider race when admitting students in order to achieve student body diversity. I'm hopeful that the court's not going to entirely toss aside that value proposition. I'm probably less hopeful about the ways in which the court is going to constrain colleges and universities' ability to do that. It's a very narrow path that already exists for colleges and universities to be able to do that. And the court is likely going to narrow that path further. But I think that we are all, as a society, and this cuts across ideological and political lines, that people understand the value proposition around diversity generally, and we fight about the how. And so I think we will continue to fight about the how. I think that we are likely to see changes afoot in the future, but I am still hopeful that we all agree that diversity is critically important and we cannot give up, right, the effort to try to achieve diversity.
Thank you. And to that end, our faculty has been very forthcoming and very proactive in putting together first a very strong statement after the summer of 2020 about our commitment to anti-racism and to promoting diversity, not only in the classroom, but also in the curriculum. And they have started a whole process of going through the curriculum and going through their syllabuses and looking at ways that they can make sure that they are teaching in this, that some of what they're doing also speaks to this area. Professor Iyer, are you on that committee that is going through the curriculum, or Professor Hawkins? I know one of you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both had, there's actually a variety of different committees that have come out of the statement. I think we both served on pieces of them. So I was a part of the group last year that helped to draft the proposal, which got accepted to ensure that upper level students have some mandatory exposure to racial justice issues in the upper level curriculum, as well as we have a new pilot class that is sort of optional for 1L students, but can give them an introduction to concepts about inequality and racial injustice in the 1L year, just for a credit, sort of reading group style of class. So I was involved in that effort. I've also been involved in, there's a subcommittee that's been looking at the bar exam and the extent to which the bar exam arises from sort of racial exclusionary origins and may continue to produce that result. So that's the work I've been most involved in, and I'll turn it over to Stacy if she wants to supplement with other things she's been working.
No, I think that that's right. I haven't actually been directly involved in those committees' work, but I have been really grateful for the efforts of my colleagues in getting us to this point where we do have a requirement, and one of the few law schools to have adopted such a requirement, that our students cannot graduate unless they are appropriately educated around these issues. And quite frankly, we're late to the game because medical schools have had a cultural competence requirement, for a long time now, well over a decade. And so I think that it's high time that we started this work, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this work on behalf of our students.
Professor Body, you're involved in a couple of different projects that are ongoing right now. One is the Inclusion Project that has done a lot of work dealing on the education front. And the president of Rutgers University, President Jonathan Holloway, has started the Institute for the Study of Global Racial Justice that you are establishing here on the Newark campus, and it's being established on all 3 campuses. Can you talk a little bit about that work and what that means, and also how students can be involved if they do decide to come here?
Sure. So the Institute for the Study of Global Racial Justice, it's a mouthful. I call it ISGRJ. Was established last year. As you mentioned, this was sort of the brainchild of President Holloway and Michelle Stevens, who is a dean on the New Brunswick campus. The purpose of the Institute is really to create opportunities for scholars who write in the areas of racial equity, racial fairness, or just basically write about race, to come together to understand each other's scholarship, to work together on various projects. The projects are very, very broad, I will say. We have actually one of the co-directors on the Camden campus is now actually in Abu Dhabi and is working on a conference in Senegal on issues of race and anti-Blackness there. We have a number of different projects that we are funding and supporting. I have resources on the Newark campus for supporting projects around race. I have a team of senior faculty at the Rutgers Newark campus, not in the law school, but in Afro-American Studies, African-American Studies, I guess we call it AFAM, as well as the School of Social Sciences. I should have mentioned that the Institute is focused on the humanities. So it was funded by a very generous grant from the Mellon Foundation to convene scholars around issues of race as well as, but in the humanities context. So it's been a labor of love. We've only been really fully operational for 6 months or so. We spent the first a number of months, just basically trying to establish all of the infrastructure, which itself has actually been a bit of a challenge working across the 3 campuses, but it's a 5-year project, and we'll see where it goes.
And how about the inclusion project? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the inclusion project, I've mentioned some of the work that I've been doing already, which has been focused on bringing together different constituencies, different stakeholders around the issues of equity in education. I do a lot of presentations around the state on this issue of racial equity and the problems of segregation in the state, which are very deeply rooted. New Jersey is the 6th most segregated state in the country for Black students, the 7th most segregated state for Latino students, which surprises a lot of people because we're a northern state. I also have someone who directs TIPS, the inclusion projects, community engagement and youth work, and we have both last spring and now we are hiring youth organizers to work on these issues and to sort of learn about racial justice in different contexts, including in an intersectional way, the ways in which race span gender and sexual orientation and the like. So that's very exciting work, and it keeps me on my toes. Well, let's just say that.
Are there ways that students are involved in what you're doing?
I do have, sorry, I should have mentioned this. So I do have 2 students who I work for. I do work for them actually, but they also work with them. They are upper level students. I started working with them when they were in their 2nd year. They're now in their 3rd year. And I asked them to do various forms of research for me on issues that also relate to my scholarship. And some of them have been involved more directly with some of the work around the lawsuit. I should have also mentioned that I'm planning a statewide conference with the Cornwall Center, which is based at Rutgers Newark, and we have a number of different stakeholders and constituencies involved in that effort as well. So a lot of work on the education front.
That's great. I think the thing that stands out is that how interdisciplinary law can be, and how our professors are working with faculty, not only law faculty, but faculty across many different disciplines, because of how it spans a variety of different ways that it affects people and institutions. So it's really exciting to be able to hear that, we don't live in a vacuum, that we really live in a big village, and that a lot of different students have an opportunity to engage in scholarship and conversation with amazing faculty beyond just the law school faculty, which is quite extraordinary. A couple of other things that come to mind as we're talking about discrimination and talking about racism, and we go back to the insurrection that happened on January 6th and the fallout that happened from that. And right now we are seeing it's a time when congressional districts are being redrawn, and where state legislatures are they're doing their gerrymandering. How is that affecting what's going on out there in terms of making, restricting the right to vote to people of color and also people of different backgrounds, so that certain people will get elected in different states and then be able to do different things in Congress from what I think all of us would want to have happen. Who would like to tackle that one? That's a big question.
I can jump in very briefly. So on that first point, though, about January 6th, I've been working with a small bipartisan group around reforming the Electoral Count Act, which is the federal statute that governs the counting of the electoral votes. Stay tuned. That's sort of to be continued. It's an ongoing conversation. On the issue of gerrymandering, I also sit on the board of the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, which has done a lot of work on redistricting, and Henil Patel, which is who is one of the lead lawyers, I would say actually in the state on this issue, and who is also a graduate of Rutgers Law School, has done phenomenal work around this. And and I would just say, I think sort of the key point to take away with respect to redistricting is just to make sure that we have our Black and Latino communities, Asian communities as well, make sure that they're represented. We've had tremendous growth in the state, in growth in terms of the diversity of our population. And so I think the goal around the latest round of redistricting, at least with respect to some of the folks who I know have been working on it, is to make sure that all of our communities are fairly represented and have a meaningful chance to participate in our elections.
Yeah, what's difficult is there's other states that aren't so forward thinking, unfortunately. And a lot is happening nationwide, which is a little scary to watch. Professor Hawkins, you unmuted, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to add to that was, how really impressed and encouraged I was by the ways in which our students have been engaged around these issues. And so during both the 2016 and the 2020 election, we had students who were poll watching, right? We have a really robust pro bono program here, and our students do a ton of pro bono service across a wide range of issues. And legal services. And one of them is organizing our students, right, to serve as poll watchers during these elections. And of course, we have a midterm election coming up, and we have all of these states that have adopted these very restrictive, voting laws. And so the ability for our students to actually be on the ground, understanding how the law works in action and how we can be active, participants in ensuring the protection of our citizens' rights, I think is so crucially important. And I've been so impressed by the ways our students engage around those issues and the opportunities that we provide for them to do that.
We had a number of times during the various elections, usually during a presidential election here in Newark, if there were residents of Essex County who were turned away at the polls, they were encouraged, they came to the law school, students did intake, and they got them to see a judge, and they enabled, there was one, I think it was the first time that President Obama was running, and over 350 people came through. There was one judge assigned, and quickly 6 more appeared. And the students were just phenomenal in getting involved with the boots on the ground kind of work that is so important to making sure that our democracy functions and that people have the right to vote. And we're seeing some things getting diluted as we're moving forward, and we're hoping that as time goes on, that things will get better, but we just don't know. Any questions in the chat, please? Students who are out there, if you've got questions, please go ahead and throw it into the chat.
While we're waiting for questions, I just wanted to piggyback on this most recent theme to really emphasize it really is extraordinary, the wide diversity of work that our students do in the types of fields that Professor Body, Professor Hawkins, and I all work in. And there are, whether it's working directly with us or working through our pro bono projects or through our clinics or with an outside organization, there are really opportunities to pursue whatever your passion might be. And there are many, many of our students who take advantage of those, both folks who come in knowing, hey, this is my passion and this is what I'm going to focus my energies on, but also folks who might be going out to a big law firm, but care about doing social justice work as a component of their practice as a lawyer. And so I think that's something that we really, the law faculty and the law students really value and try to support here at Rutgers.
And we had a session yesterday, and some of what we heard from the professors, this was all in the corporate area, is that you can do both. You can do social justice work and be a corporate attorney as well. And sometimes you have more clout because you've got the firm behind you. And many of the firms have pro bono projects that their lawyers get involved in. So if there is something that you care very much about, our job is to train you to be a good lawyer, a good analytical thinker, a good problem solver, and then how you fulfill your passion and your interest in helping others in ways that sometimes are unexpected. Like you just don't know when you start law school what path is going to lead you. I'm sure the three professors here had no clue that they would be where they are today, yet doors open for them and things happen. And our job is to make sure that we give you the tools to make that happen. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. Let's go through for any last words, because I think we've gotten through quite a lot in a short amount of time. So Professor Iyer, why don't you go first?
Sure. So I'll just say thank you to the students who joined us here today. Really encourage you, and I think I can probably speak for all of us on the panel. If you have any questions about Rutgers, please do reach out to us. I think it's a community that really has sort of places unique value on issues of social and racial justice. And we are always excited to welcome students who are interested in these issues to the law school.
Professor Body, go ahead.
Sure. So yes, thank you for attending. Thank you for being here. All I would add is that I think that Rutgers, what I love about Rutgers Law School is the energy that the students bring, the commitment that the students bring to various issues, whether it's in the field of, what I do or in other areas. That we have a really active student body, people who are really engaged, and faculty who are really engaged. And there's a lot of rigor behind that too. I just want to make that clear, just in terms of teaching our students to think analytically, to think rigorously around issues of law, to be prepared to know what the other side, so to speak, is going to say. And so I would just, encourage you to give Rutgers Law School a really close look and really close consideration, because I think it's a really fantastic institution.
Thank you. Professor Hawkins, who I should also mention is a vice dean. So you're one of my colleagues in the administration. Go ahead.
Now the pressure is on even more. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
I just also wanted to say thank you for those of you who joined us this afternoon. If you are someone who is interested in issues that involve diversity, racial and social justice, if that's one of the reasons why you joined the panel, I can assure you, as Professor Iyer said, as Professor Body has said, Rutgers Law School is a school that really cares deeply about these issues. We are committed to these issues. We have done and continue to do so much to make sure that we are living out that commitment in meaningful ways. And it's not just the faculty. We have a really engaged student body. We connect with the community. In fact, both the Newark and the Camden campuses outside of the law school are really civically engaged campuses. We really care about serving the communities in which we are situated. And so we provide meaningful opportunities for our students to really start to get engaged around these issues and to figure out how they might express their passions in the law in practical ways as early as, really the first year of law school, where there are pro bono opportunities very early on and throughout. And again, we're always excited to welcome our students and to engage with them around those passions. So thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. This was really inspiring. And thank you for all the work that you do to make sure that our communities have access to all of the legal protections that they all deserve. And we are really in awe of hearing of all of the scholarship and the work that you are doing in many, many areas that affect really all of us. So thank you. Glad that you could be here today. Thank you for all the students who joined us. We've got some thank yous in the chat, and we will see you soon. Okay.
Thank you. Take care.